In this exciting episode, we meet Lorna Thomas, a former Hollywood great who has fallen on hard times. Now, a young man has taken up with her. Alas, they couldn't call it the case of the Sunset Boulevard, so they decided to make Perry Mason Season 3, Episode 2, The Case of the Watery Witness. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose here is pretty simple: provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do a pod for every episode of the television series, and in episodes like this one, I'll take a look at some of those made-for-TV movies too. Each episode, I give a brief refresher of the plot, list some key pieces of trivia, and tackle the episode or movie's main theme. Then I feature a Perry Proverb, a moment of wisdom from the man himself, and finish with a post-case water cooler where, just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can rehash the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the law library! Each episode in the Law Library, we look more closely into a legal conundrum in Perry's past and present in order to find fresh precedents for future cases. This episode in the Law Library, we consult our files on adoption. It's a topic that's come up before. Season 1, The Case of the Baited Hook. Season 1, The Case of the Screaming Woman, with Dr. Barnes running an adoption farm out of his seaside doctor's office. And Season 2, The Case of the Stuttering Bishop. In this Season 3 episode, a young woman's husband is trying to determine if his wife is really the daughter of a Hollywood star. Perry lets the man know that in California, it's complicated.
In California, Mr. Clark, a child placed for adoption through the court ceases to have any legal bonds whatever with its natural parents.
I see.
Let's be clear. What Perry just said is true in every state. Typically, we think of this legal severing of ties between a biological parent and child as something that protects the new adopting parents from legal repercussions from a birth mother or father who want to get back in the picture. In California, I guess, the complication is that these Hollywood stars are out there having all of these children out of wedlock, putting them up for adoption, and perhaps those kids will want a piece of their mom or dad's bank account when they get older and discover who their parent really is. But George and Betty Clark aren't in it for a money grab. That's all Lorna Thomas can think about, though, which means it's about time to get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Watery Witness. California. It really is the land of opportunity. Your name is Fred Bushmiller. You're a private detective from Oregon. But here you are. You just drive up to the lakeside estate of a Hollywood star, Lorna Thomas, and it all starts happening for you. Number one, you witness a fight between Thomas and her manager, Dennis Briggs, that happens on the water and looks like Thomas is trying to kill Briggs. Number two, you have info about Thomas's put up for adoption daughter, and you turn it into a blackmail bot gig in Thomas's house. Ha 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 ha.
We can talk about your daughter, if you like.
My what?
The girl you put out for adoption, February 17th, 1935.
Go on.
Maybe you didn't even know she was still alive. Maybe you didn't even care. Unless it affects something, like this picture you're making.
But one way or another, you're determined to blackmail me, aren't you?
I just thought we might have interests in common. I mean, I'm new around here. I don't even have a car to get around in yet. Or a place to stay.
Number 3, you get into a sweet Ford Thunderbird convertible before you get accosted by George Clark, the husband of Thomas's alleged daughter.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about a private detective named Fred Bushmiller coming to Oregon City and sneaking around and snooping and asking my wife a lot of questions about her past.
Listen, Clark, I just barely got here myself. My job has nothing to do with all that stuff.
Mine had.
Yep, LA is a great big freeway. Bushmiller didn't even have to put 100 down to get that car. But let's talk about the other players in our episode. George and Betty Clark just want peace of mind. That basically consists in George browbeating Betty into confronting her possible mother.
What will I say?
What do you say? What else have you been saying ever since I've known you? Mother, mother, mother. I wonder who she is. Hey, maybe it's that flower woman over there. Maybe it's the Queen of France, over and over again.
And then there's Lorna Thomas, who's supposedly making a comeback film. But the cash isn't there, and that's got Tony Rayburn in a huff.
Listen to me, Lorna. We made an agreement, you and I.
Don't you dare mess me up. I don't have to make any picture unless I want to. And the way you've been acting lately, I'm not at all sure
Well, it's no surprise Hollywood ending when I tell you Lorna is the one who gets offed. George Clark gets arrested, and Perry's on the case. Who did it? Bushmiller?
Perhaps Lorna Thomas was in the study putting on her jewelry.
No.
Then where was she? The wall safe was open. The jewel box was on the desk.
She was dead.
Nah, that private detective amateur just stole Thomas's jewelry, which turned out to be paste anyway. Thanks, Paul Stool Pigeon.
Yeah, that's right. Junk. Glass paste.
What about Dennis Briggs? Nah, he adored her.
Then suddenly she became afraid and lashed out at you with the boat gaff.
After all those years, how could she ever think I'd really hurt her?
What about Rayburn? Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner.
You're really the only one who stood to gain a single penny by her death.
A single penny. You insist upon being diplomatic, Mr. Mason. I face starvation. I've never known anyone so cruel, so selfish, so completely uncaring for anyone else in the world. Yes, I killed her.
The episode ends with Perry, Paul, and Della picnicking on what looks like the old Thomas Lakeside estate, while George and Betty canoodle in a rowboat. Give those kids some privacy, Perry.
At least we know the world keeps turning.
Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't remark on the serious uptick in Lieutenant Tragg's, quote, identifying marks, end quote, in Season 3. Comes up in this episode.
Now, Lieutenant, I show you this bracelet marked as an exhibit for the state, and I ask if you recognize it.
Yes, sir. It has my identifying mark.
Just note that here, the identifying mark is not on the murder weapon, since that would have just meant Tragg's mark on Rayburn's hands. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. A Della is something about a particular actor or actress in the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode. Now, we know that Lorna Thomas put Betty up for adoption in 1935. Tony Rayburn gives us some more information about Betty's alleged father.
In 1935, she seemed to be going around a good deal with some Irish South American.
She may have married Raphael, for all I know. All the girls took aim, but none of them ever got near any of the millions they figured he had. But maybe Lorna did.
What happened to Raphael O'Connor?
He was a revolutionary at the wrong time. Executed, as I recall.
Wait a minute. An Irish South American? Revolutionary at the wrong time? Maybe the solution to this one is easy, but I can't place it. Is there a mid-30s revolution that the writers are implying O'Connor was part of? That's our Paul prompt. Let me know what you find. Our Della for this episode is none other than Douglas Dick. You know him better as Fred Bushmiller.
I better call you a doctor, huh?
We last saw him in Season 1's The Case of the Crimson Kiss. He was Dane Grover, and he'll be in a bunch more Perry eps before he's done. Let's give him 10 facts about our man Douglas. Number 1, he was born in 1920 in Charleston, West Virginia, and he grew up in Versailles, don't call it Versailles, Kentucky. Number 2, he studied drama at the University of Kentucky and the University of Arizona. Number 3, before he served his country in World War II. He then returned to acting. He was in Baltimore when a talent scout for Hal Wallace. You'll remember that producer's name from our last episode, Marion Marshall. This talent scout spotted Douglas Dick on the stage and signed him to a contract. Number 4, his early movies include 1946's The Searching Wind, where he plays the role that Monty Clift inaugurated on Broadway, and 1948's Rope. That's right, this dude was in a Hitchcock picture. Number 5, other notable films in the Douglas Dick filmography: Saigon, Iron Mistress, both opposite Alan Ladd, The Accused with Loretta Young, George Stevens's Something to Live For, and Flaming Star from 1960, starring Elvis and Barbara Eden. His career didn't quite end up the way many thought it would. Here was Dick's reflection on it, quote, "Perhaps I should have been more competitive for parts, but that's not my style. Also, I wasn't very clever socially, and that's important in Hollywood," close quote. Number 6, the 50s and 60s saw Dick moving into television. He was the son of a tugboat captain on 50s syndicated show Waterfront. And you can also find him in episodes of Whirlybirds, 77 Sunset Strip, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, Mannix, Da-Da-Da-Da, and, of course, Perry Mason. Number 7, he married a television writer in 1963, one Peggy Chantler. She had credits like The Adventures of Superman, Dennis the Menace, and Hazel on her resume. They actually even wrote some TV episodes together. An episode of I Dream of Jeannie, The Mothers-in-Law, and Bewitched. Number 8, in 1971, Dick went back to school at the California School of Professional Psychology and got his PhD, then opened a psychotherapy practice in West Hollywood. Apparently, he and his wife ran with a set that included novelist Henry Farrell. You probably know him best as the author of the novel Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which got turned into the movie with Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. And these cats lived down the street from Evelyn Venable, who was a Hollywood actress turned professor of classics at UCLA. Go look up her wiki page, Evelyn Venable. Number 9, Dick remained married to Peggy Chantler until her death in 2001. Dick himself died in 2016 at the age of 95 in his sleep. And then number 10, one last note. He asked that donations in his name be given to the Audubon Society. He and Peggy had no children. He was survived by a couple of nephews. Our Perry for this episode involves Perry's interest in Lorna Thomas. First, he has Della do a little research so he can do a little research.
And see if you can find me some fan magazines.
Oh, I think Gertie has quite a few of them under her desk.
Della. From 1935.
I mean, this is the right move, but I'm not sure why Perry is on fan magazine duty instead of Paul, you know what I mean? The answer becomes a little clearer when he and Della make what has to be a 10:30 p.m. house call on Lorna Thomas.
Anything you want me to say, Perry?
No, this is just a friendly visit. I want to stall off any chance of a client being stuck with invasion of privacy, that's all.
Besides, you're curious.
Ah, Perry's a little curious about Hollywood royalty. It's a shame that he only got to meet Thomas after she died. Our theme for this episode is greatness. Dennis Briggs gives us the key quotation for this theme as he talks about Lorna Thomas.
She was one of the great ones, you know. One of the really great ones.
Well, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but from everything we see, Thomas was no longer great. This is not because she lost her money or even her ability to appear in big-time movies. It's because she treats devoted hands like Dennis Briggs or Harriet Snow with total contempt, and we haven't even gotten to the fact that she's susceptible to flattery from some blowhard like Bushmiller, or that she's so dismissive of her biological daughter that even devotee Harriet Snow says she's gone too far.
That was pretty cruel, even for you.
Oh, leave me alone.
Isn't there anything in you for the girl?
Notoriety, that's one thing. Greatness, that's another. Hollywood, full of the former, but the world is pretty scarce on the latter. Maybe Thomas was great once, Mr. Briggs, but if you want to know what human greatness looks like, you were talking to him when you were in the court. And no, I don't mean Hamilton Burger. Now, let's hear a Perry proverb. You gotta appreciate a man who can dispense wisdom and still listen to reason. George Clark comes and talks with Perry about finding his wife's biological mother. Here is Perry's proverb.
You know, sometimes it's best to leave certain questions unanswered.
Now that's wise, but George responds this way.
Or would you just sit there if it turned out to be somebody like Lorna Thomas?
And you know what Perry does with his wise advice? He shelves it and agrees to help. You know, sometimes it's best to leave certain questions unanswered. This just wasn't one of those times, and guess what? Neither was leaving the question of who killed Lorna Thomas unanswered one of those times. So, Perry answered that one too. Let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
You know, there is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Each episode in the water cooler, we offer deleted scenes where we imagine some sequences that didn't make the episode's final cut. Number 1, Lorna Thomas and Dennis Briggs go horseback riding with disastrous and hilarious results. Number 2, Bushmiller has to grin and bear a thoroughly watered down drink from Lorna Thomas and smile while guzzling it. I guess I'm wondering where the cash for quality liquor is coming from. Number 3, a brief scene with Bushmiller and Thomas out on the town where Bushmiller is the one who wants to get home early to get his beauty sleep. Number 4, a montage of Tony Rayburn's never-made films with Over the Hill, Claudette Colbert, Miriam Hopkins, Kay Francis, Irene Dunn, Greer Garson, and Claire Trevor. Number 5, George and Betty try to get some private time, but Perry, Paul, and Della keep popping up at an amusement park, on a cruise to the Bahamas, and finally, just going to pick up some groceries at an Oregon grocery store. Our Paul prompt from the last episode, The Case of the Spurious Sister, concerned how we talk about gambling.
Please, let me have just $2,000.
Think about it, Marie. I hope you'll see I'm doing the right thing. Gambling's a disease. You've got to fight.
We asked the question, when did we start talking about gambling like it was a disease? My dad wrote in with this note, gambling has been a part of society in the U.S. since its early history. However, it was not until 1980 that the medical profession in the U.S. first recognized pathological gambling as a psychiatric disorder. Obviously, the Perry Mason Show was well ahead of its time, my dad comments. He also pointed out correctly that I identified Marie Chapman's ex-husband as Howard Sprague rather than Walter Sprague. Howard Sprague, of course, the mustachioed character on the Andy Griffith Show in Mayberry RFD. Close. I think I saw Walter as Milquetoast, Walter Sprague from Perry, and immediately thought of Howard Sprague. Thanks for sending that correction in. I did a little digging on my own about the Paul prompt. I think the language of disease probably came to gambling from Alcoholics Anonymous. A little research shows that indeed the first Gamblers Anonymous group began in, wait for it, Los Angeles in 1957. In the Q&A on the Gamblers Anonymous webpage, the first question is, what is compulsive gambling? The answer? The explanation that seems most acceptable to Gamblers Anonymous members is that compulsive gambling is an illness, progressive in its nature, which can never be cured but can be arrested. I hope they have a chapter in prison for Ralph Hibberly. As always, I'd love feedback about this particular episode or the podcast in general. Was there something about this episode you'd like to comment on or something you'd like to correct? You can email me at theperrypod@gmail.com. All PerryPod episodes are now available via Spotify and YouTube as well as iTunes. Join us next time when we answer the question that's plagued us since at least the 17th century. Just what does the word garrulous mean anyway? I guess we'll have to find out if we're going to understand the case of the garrulous gambler. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat.